the Outdoor Drive Podcast.
All right. Welcome back to episode 123. This podcast is absolutely wild. I am in total awe. This is your boy, East Coast Trev, and
This is Steve.
what's up, brother?
Same old, man.
Well, for you guys that don't know, we normally record the podcast and we go back and we do the intro. So that's where my head is absolutely spun. This, as Stephen would call it, this is a marathon podcast. Probably one that's probably needed. Huge thanks to Christian Costa on the connection with Dieter on this one. This is going to be probably one of the craziest podcasts. If you guys don't have a brand new notebook in front of you with two pens, you're probably going to waste your time. So you probably stop, pause, go grab that, and then come back because it's definitely going to be needed.
Absolutely. We're getting a first-class school, not only in elk behavior, calling, tips, tactics, and strategies, but I'm finally getting someone on here that is resident in my hometown in Arizona that also vouches that the biggest elk in the world come from my hometown in Arizona.
This is very true.
Literally moved down there for the elk in my hometown. And he's going to take all the tips and tactics. He's learned everything from Oregon down to the Mexico border and give us a run through on how to hunt elk.
And the funniest thing is we didn't even know that before we had him on the podcast. We didn't learn about this until now.
Pre-podcast.
So,
he was like, well, I got a place up here in the White Mountains. Like, oh yeah, where at? And he's like, oh, the Sholo Pine Top area. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
That's right. Well, guys, listen, we're going to keep this one absolutely short and sweet on the intro. We're going to go through our partners. I want to congratulate the people who won the Squirrel Competition, and then we will dive right into the podcast on News Free Cruise with Mike Salter, and then we'll dive right into this short, sweet, quick, and fast. First off, we'll start off with Gator Outdoors. Huge thanks to them for giving the kill t-shirts for the 2022 Squirrel Competition. If you guys haven't got over to Gator Outdoors, GatorOutdoors.com, use promo code OutdoorDrive25. Nor'easter Game Calls also gave into the Squirrel Competition. Nor'easterGameCalls.com for your custom calls. They are going to also be coming out with mouth read calls, which will be very important after this podcast because we will be getting elk ones. Latitude Outdoors, LatitudeOutdoors.com, the Method 2, Classic 2, all of the most comfortable saddles on the market. Head on over there to Latitude Outdoors. Rack Bracket, the safest way to store your European mount on the wall. Rackbracket.com. Use Outdoor Drive 10 on that one. Save yourself 10%. Novix Treestands. NovixOutdoors.com. Promo code Outdoor15, 15% on theirs. You can get the mini sticks, full size platforms, so on and so forth over there. So go and check those guys out. And let's do it. I will and want to congratulate the winners from the 2022 Squirrel Competition. There was over 50 applicants that put in Squirrel into this whole thing. Super I'm actually blown away at the fact of how many people actually got in on this and how much fun that we actually had and bouncing back and forth. It went down to the nitty-gritty here in the last day. Huge shout out to Cody Evans and Joe Seaborn. Those two actually called it a tie. So they're actually both winning first place because they were neck to neck. They both were over 32 squirrels, by the way, for the season. And they both started mid-season, by the way. They didn't even start in the beginning. So these two were going head to head and fighting it out. So they just decided to call it null and void. They're splitting the prize and going on with that. So also the biggest gray squirrel is Philip Whetstone. He got a 27 3/4 inch gray squirrel.
That's insane.
Talk about a booner squirrel on that one,
That's a
right? I mean, like,
220-inch freaking squirrel.
what? Um, I'm gonna butcher this one, but it's Brian Pikeronsky. I think that's almost actually perfect. Brian came in with a 26 1/4 inch fox squirrel.
Holy
Absolutely
crap.
knocked it out of the park. The thing is that he had, bro, his gray squirrel was 25 inches. I thought that was it. Like when he shot that, I was like 25 inches. I said, that's it, dude. That's the biggest gray that there is, right? And then um Philip came in with the 27 3/4 gray. And I was like, no way. So Brian ends up hitting out hard and then coming out with a 26 1/4 fox on that one. And huge shout out to the taxidermy shop, Brian Anders of Mississippi, for giving out 2 squirrel mounts to those 2 with the biggest gray and the biggest fox squirrel.
That is amazing, man. That
really
is amazing.
Cool. Especially, it's really cool to get everybody back in the woods and do something a little bit different. There was a ton of people. Chelsea Pebbles, who's actually she got in this, and her little daughter, actually the only youth to get in on this squirrel competition. She donated a squirrel tote, so we're going to give that away in the drawing for everybody that had entered into the squirrel competition. So huge thank to Chelsea on that one. But super excited, and on to the next competition. We'll have a coyote competition. We're going to let this one breathe for a couple of days. I got to come up with the rules and regulations, and then we'll boost on to the coyote competition after.
We are rolling into breeding season, and we're seeing dogs drop. So,
dude,
good
I'll
time
tell you
for
this:
it.
Brockett, the taxidermist that does all my taxidermy here, he got 6 in alone just today.
Wow.
Six
That's
coyotes
awesome.
that he got in just alone today. Actually, I'm thinking no, we had 6 down the ground and 2 more were coming, so it's 8 for the day. It's getting to that time, guys. So get out there and do some coyote hunting, and we'll get these rules and regulations posted up.
Absolutely. Well, let's figure out what's going on in the world today. Bringing you the news for the cruise is our good buddy Mike Salter. Take it away, Mike.
Hey everyone, we're going to start this one off with some legislative updates. First out of California and hog hunting. It's no secret that how destructive hogs can be, and as a result, a bill has been introduced in California to help control feral hogs. There is no closed season on feral hogs in California, but SB 856 would eliminate the need for permits to hunt the hogs, providing more hunting opportunities to help control the expanding populations in the state. So be in support of that. It's a great opportunity to allow for some more hog hunting in California, so reach out to your legislators to support that bill. To Rhode Island, where Bill H7216 has been proposed to allow taking of mushrooms on any DEM lands. So this would provide significant opportunities for all of you that like to get out there and forage for mushrooms. So again, reach out to your legislators to support that bill and allow some foraging on those state-owned lands. Now to Hawaii, where a bill that was approved in 2021 actually took effect starting in January, which prohibits the capture, entanglement, and killing of any sharks. So unfortunately, this marks the first state to actually prohibit shark fishing, and hopefully we won't see this spread to other states like we have with some of the trail camera prohibitions. So more to come on that, and see if anyone else starts to follow suit. Now for a ton of opportunities coming up across the country for special hunts. First in Florida, where Youth Waterfowl Day is scheduled for 2/12 and is open to use 15 and younger, accompanied by an adult, and neither the youth or adult are required to have a license or permits to take part in that hunt. Youth turkey hunts are also scheduled for February 26th and 27th south of State Route 70, and March 12th and 13th north of Route 70 for youth 15 and under. And additionally, Florida has actually 30 hunts, youth hunts scheduled on their youth hunting program calendar for this spring for turkeys, hogs, and other species. So check that out and get some kids outdoors down there. Florida is also going to be hosting a Veterans and Active Military Waterfowl Hunting Days this weekend, February 5th and 6th, which will allow veterans and active duty military personnel to hunt ducks, geese, mergansers, coots, and moorhens. So a great program and opportunity for those that are serving and have served our country. Now to Maryland, who will be providing a youth, veteran, and military waterfowl hunting days also this weekend on February 5th. This is open to youth 16 and younger, veterans, and active duty military, and they can hunt ducks, geese, and coots on private and public land. There are some changes to the regular season bag limits associated with that hunt, and licenses and stamps are required. So be sure to check those before partaking in the hunt, and the licenses and stamps can be purchased online if needed. Now to California, where youth waterfowl hunting days are also scheduled this weekend for the 5th and 6th, and is open to those 17 and younger on both private and public lands, with many private duck clubs actually opening their doors to welcome the next generation. So if you're going to take part or have a youth that wants to take part, be sure to check those local clubs to see if they are taking part in the hunt this weekend. California will hold a veteran active military personnel waterfowl hunting days on February 12th and 13th, with hunting allowed both on private and public lands. And California is also holding several late season goose hunting opportunities for everyone throughout February and March in specific areas, so check those out for some late season hunts. Lastly, to Michigan, where the Michigan Pheasants Forever State Council is hosting the Women on the Wing Learn to Pheasant Hunt Day on March 5th at Muzzy Pheasant Farm in Corunna. Participants will learn to hunt pheasants with dogs. There will be a presentation on Pheasants Forever and the Women on the Wing initiative. There will be clay target shooting, and the pheasant hunt and lunch will be provided. Hunting vests and 12 and 20 gauge ammo will be provided to participants, but the participants will need to bring eye and ear protection and will need to let the host know if they will need to borrow a shotgun. Registration for that program is $60, which includes a Pheasant Forever membership, lunch, and the hunting. And registration is limited to 20 participants and can be completed on the Pheasants Forever website under the Events in Michigan tab. So get on that quick before it fills up. That sounds like a great program. Lot of programs popping up all over the country to get people out and hunt, whether it be for use or adult onset hunters. So just get out there and get people involved with all this stuff coming down. And if anyone sees anything, please send it to me. It's great to get that information out to people that might not have it. As always, you can reach out to me at Mike Salter on Facebook or bearded_bowhunter21 on Instagram. And with that, enjoy the rest of your ride.
All right, Mike. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. As always, news for your cruise, guys. If you have any news or anything for Mike Salter, hit him up on Instagram, Facebook. Send him an email, phone, snail mail, whatever you got to do. Get the news over to Mike so we can make a better segment for you, my friends.
Definitely.
Well, buddy, what do you think, man?
Well,
I know that it's
sharpen up your pencils and drop some fresh ink in your pens. Get a fresh piece of paper or 10.
You definitely don't want to use a pencil for this one. I promise you that. For any of you guys going east to west, Midwest to west, anybody that wants to know about elk calling, why am I even going through this?
Let's just let him do it.
All right, let's go.
All right, here we go.
All right, we're back on the phone with Dieter. How are you doing, man? How's everything?
Going good. How you guys doing?
Good.
We're doing all right.
It's a pleasure to have a... Ooh, go ahead.
Are you guys all boxed up for the winter time, getting ready, thinking about dreams of elk hunting in the fall?
Oh, I have dreams of elk hunting year round just because I don't get to do it.
Yeah.
Stephen always talks about it to me, but I'm really interested to pick your brain on this whole thing, especially being a 4-time champion caller and all that and all the hunting that you've done in the past. So why don't we just dive right into it? We'll get this thing right into overdrive. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Okay, my name is Dieter Kaboth, and I've been lucky enough to win 4 World Elk Calling Championships with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation. I stepped away from it several years ago for a couple of reasons. I was an employee of the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation at one time as a regional director in the state of Oregon, northern part of Oregon. And then I was a judge at one time And then a couple of judges that are on the panel are there because of my suggestion. So I thought it would just be a little bit of a conflict of interest to stay competing. I don't feel like I have anything to prove to anybody. So I just stopped. But I do several seminars throughout the year and teach new people how to elk hunt. What do they basically do if they ever want to come out west and go elk hunting? And that's basically what I do. And I just recently started my own company. I started a statue company, aluminum statues. I was working for an archery company. I don't want to say who it was because I don't want to give them any kudos because I'm using a Matthews bow now. So I don't want to.
We know how that goes.
And, it doesn't matter, but all bows are good. It's just the shooter behind them, you know.
Agreed.
You put a good shooter in, put a bow in any good shooter's hands, and they're going to shoot it good. So, but I am shooting Matthews. I will give them a plug.
It's
Fair
Dodge,
enough.
Ford, Chevy, right? It's just
that's really all
what
it
you
is.
like. It really is.
So, guys, I've been really fortunate. Also, I've called over. I lost count a long time ago, but my best guesstimate, I've called probably over 150 elk to a kill over the years, and this is since about 1986 when I started elk hunting, and I didn't know anything. Elk calls were really starting to be developed by Wayne Carlton back in those days. He developed the first elk call. A lot of people will remember these people if you're my age, but like Larry D. Jones came out after that, and Glenn Berry, Rocky Jacobson. There were a lot of different calling companies out there. People started to evolve with these elk calls. They can make a profit. And now some young guys are doing really well doing this. So over the years, so kudos to them for carrying it on. There's certain calls that I use that we're going to talk about here and why I use them and how I use them. So everybody, they're going to know about how to use calls, why to use calls, what do the calls mean, what do the sounds mean when you actually hear them. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about also when you go out hunting out west from your kitchen table on the East Coast somewhere, the Midwest. By the way, I was a Midwestern boy, grew up milking cows, wrestling in the state of Wisconsin, and never heard an elk in my life. Never heard an elk call. Didn't even know they made calls. And moved out west probably about 1984-ish or so, 83, 84. And I wanted to learn how to elk hunt. Everybody was elk hunting. And I would ask people questions, and nobody really knew anything. They knew stuff, but they were really cliquish, and they didn't want to share any information. And I think a lot of times, especially with the elk calls and stuff, people didn't understand the elk calls because, like I said, we were starting to evolve. I remember in the 70s when nobody hunted out of tree stands. And it was just starting to come about in the early 70s when I was a kid. And I asked people today, I remember about 20 years later, fast forward 20 years to the invention of the tree stand, I asked friends, I said, hey, did deer look up? And I asked the question for a reason. I wanted to know, did the deer start to, what I want to say, did they start to basically evolve? That's the word I'm looking for. Did they evolve in looking up because that's where danger came from? Because when I started hunting with tree stands, deer rarely ever looked up. They didn't need to. And with the invention of the tree stand, now deer do. They've been seeing other deer get shot around them, and hey, danger comes out of trees. You need to be aware up there as well as on the ground. So where I'm going with it is the invention of an elk call. I've been around this evolution of when did it start to where we are today. And so I'll share a lot of the information, what I've learned, and hopefully that'll fast forward you guys or whoever's listening into becoming a pretty good elk hunter right out of the chute.
Is there one call that works better than another, or they all have their purpose? Do you like diaphragms over other calls, or?
Great question. They all have their purpose for sure. A diaphragm call is what I learned to start with. There's so many things you can do with a diaphragm call, and let me just demonstrate really quick. I had a cough drop in my mouth. Let me demonstrate. So here's a cow call. Here's an elk bugle, and I'll teach everybody how to do this before you leave tonight. That's an elk bugle. Then we're going to have basically, you got with a diaphragm. You guys, there's going to be a lot of better turkey callers than me out there. A lot better turkey callers, I should say. But coyote.
Yep.
Recording in progress.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Got it. So you can do goose. And poor attempt at a goose call. I know world champion goose callers are just going to be sticking their finger down their throat going, yeah.
Hey, out there when you're out west and you're trying to get it done with an elk cow call and just running that reed, and if you can still pull that off, you're doing a lot better than most people.
Yeah, yeah. But, let's talk about the calls first, you guys. Let's talk about calls, what they mean, how do I use them, what calls. That was a great question that Trevor asked. What calls do I like? What are my favorites? And I'm going to show you those here right now. But let's break down what these sounds are. Okay, so here's a little musical lesson. So I'm just going to touch briefly on this. You're going to have to practice it. I don't have an external call, but they make external calls today. We're really literally like a Mac Daddy elk call. It's called a Mac Daddy. All you do is you blow into it, and it's got this actual diaphragm and you just push with a button on it. You just blow, and it'll go from a low pitch. As you squeeze your finger or your thumb on it, it'll go from a low pitch to a high pitch, and there's your bugle, low pitch to high pitch. So when you put a diaphragm in your mouth, you want to put it with the horseshoe facing outward like this, okay? And you want to put it in the roof of your mouth with it facing outward, kind of put these up behind your front teeth, and you're going to run your tongue on this, just like this. And this, when you press soft, it'll make a low tone. And as steadily increase the pressure, it starts cutting off your air, by the way, so you got to push harder, but it'll go from a low tone to a high tone. There's your bugle. So what I'm doing with my tongue is, and then I just drop it off. Drop it off abruptly, because if you don't, it's going to sound like an elephant. It'll sound. Okay.
Yeah.
But really, in essence, that's a great way to practice, and I'll tell you why. It's a great way to practice this because when you're doing it like that, what you're doing is, as you come down like that, you're making a cow call. Listen. So what the camera's not picking up here in this little microphone, I'm using my cell phone. What it's not picking up is you can get really low with this. You can make it sound like a calf or a cow, and I'm going to show you that as well. But let's go back to that elk bugle really quick, okay, everybody? So what we're going to do is this with it. As I start to go into the call, I can growl a little bit to add a little bit more realism to it. And you can also add a tube. Now this one's by Rocky Mountain Game Calls, one of my favorite companies. Rocky Jacobson's the developer of these calls. Kurt Howard's the owner now, and Mike Matley. They bought it from Rocky here a couple of years ago. Give a shout out to those guys, really good buddies of mine. So I'll just do with this. Maybe you can hear it. If it started blowing out that mic, you guys got to tell me. You guys have those headsets on. You got to tell me so I don't blow your eardrums out. But I'm not going to blow real hard, but this is a little bit more realism if you use the tube.
Right.
Drop it off. Another thing you can do is I'm going into the high note. I'm going to hum. Or buzz like a bee. If you have a diaphragm in your mouth, buzz like a bee like this. Go bzz, bzz. Buzz. So as I start to go into the high note, I don't know if you could hear that or not.
Yep.
Oh,
I'm going to raise
absolutely.
my finger when I start humming. I'm going to raise my finger and you'll hear it.
Yep. You get that raspy
Adds
flow
a little
in
bit
it.
more realism to the call, right? I'm giving you all my kind of little championship kind of secrets here, but I want to tell everybody everything I know so they can be as realistic as possible. You don't need to do that in the elk woods, but if you want to if you want to sound realistic, it does help a little bit, right? Steve, you being from Arizona, you've seen some of the biggest bulls in the United States.
Absolutely.
There's more between Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, that region right up to there where you grew up around Sholo area, are some of the biggest elk in the country. And they're very, very hard to get tags. I mean, I'd really recommend people put in for those areas. Some of the best elk management in the United States. That's why they get so big. But going back to this, why I'm saying that is you will never sound big and loud enough to intimidate a big bull.
No.
Just
I agree with you.
Yeah. And there's no human being in the world that can make the sheer volume that a bull elk can produce. Our lung capacities are not as big as a girth of an elk. And when they push all that air out, I mean, they got all that volume behind it. Where you actually, if you've never been around it before, you kind of feel it vibrate. If you've been close enough to a turkey where you hear them spitting and drumming, it's that feel of that vibration when you're close enough. It's tenfold that with an elk.
Oh, absolutely.
That's why a lot of turkey hunters love elk hunting.
Yep.
Is the excitement of it, of calling. Well, let's get back to the calls really quick. There's your bugle, low pitch to high pitch. Now, I've learned over the years, I have more success. That's how I used to do my seminars. But I've had more success. And I was hunting with a guy by the name of Floyd Sanders. And Floyd said, Floyd, the last recent years, I haven't had much luck bugling in elk. He says, well, I have luck all the time. I said, well, what are you doing different? He says, I'm not starting out with the low pitch to high pitch. He says, that's what all you guys say in the seminars. And I just did it to you. But I want you to hear, they do make that sound. There's nothing wrong with it. But how I really been calling in elk over the last few years because of my friend, I'm going to give shout outs where shout outs are due. I didn't invent all of this stuff. But if you listen to a bull, a lot of times they start out with that high pitch. So you press hard with your diaphragm, hard, and then you're going to come, ew. That's how we're going to do it. If this was your tongue, ew. And just drop it off. Yep. All the fancy calling, all the fancy growling and all that, throw it out the window. Listen to what the elk do. And I've noticed over the years in my evolution of calling and learning that that's what they're doing. They're making that high pitch and just drop it off. At the end, I'm making a little ooh sound.
Yep.
You can hear
a little bit of a chuckle.
Hear it?
Yep.
I put it together. I did it just once by itself, then I put it together so you could hear it. And going into the chuckle, that's perfect. That's a perfect bridge into what I'm going to talk to next. A chuckle is what you hear at the end of it. Now, sometimes bulls bugle, sometimes just bulls chuckle. And understand what you're hearing when they're chuckling. When they're chuckling doing this, they're basically, and watch some of the videos, get videos on elk that are out there. They're actually popping their bellies right here and they're peeing all over themselves.
Yep.
They're urinating. They're just making all kinds of smell all over themselves. And they do it for two different reasons, a couple reasons. They do it as a deterrent to other bulls, and they'll do it as an attractant to the cows. Your wives or your girlfriends were attracted to you for some reason. I don't want to say.
We're still not sure why.
But, yeah. I don't want to, yeah. But we do give off pheromones that are attracted to, that are unknown to us, and the same thing with your spouse, with you or your girlfriend or whatever. But they urinate on themselves to be a deterrent, because a big, huge 400 bull that I've smelled, that I've helped have my knife in to gut out, they smell a lot different than a little raghorn.
Yeah, your young
you can
satellite
smell it
bulls.
yourself. And if you can smell it, they can smell it.
Yep.
And knowing that, when we talk about elk hunting, you're going to understand why elk come in the way they come in, because they want to get downwind of you, not because they're wanting to see if you're using a Rocky Mountain game call or a native call or a Primo's call, or they're coming in because they think you're an elk. If they thought you were a human, it'd have been all over with to begin with. They're coming in because they think you are an elk, but they're coming in downwind because they want to smell, they want to see with their nose before they get into a battle that they really don't want to sign up for, So kind of keep that in mind when we talk about hunting and setups and we get into that aspect of this. So let's go back to the chuckle. Chuckle starts with a high pitch. And I snap off my tongue, or if you're using a lip call like Rocky Mountain Game Calls makes, to make one, you could use your lip right here, or your teeth. There's a little pressure plate. You put your tooth right there at the bottom of your teeth, and you press on it. I don't have one to display to you. I apologize. Maybe we can do this again, and I'll get a couple more of those calls. I just grabbed these out of my backpack in my truck because I was guiding in New Mexico, and this is all I had before I signed up for this podcast. So, but what we're going to do is we're going to make that high pitch, drop off our tongue, and we're going to go at the end. How to practice this. When you're sitting at home this winter, planning on going on an elk hunt, and you want to learn how to chuckle, how to practice this is do it one at a time, and we're going to build up our coordination to it. But we're going to do it just like this. And we're going to start to put it together. Now, if you want to get really good with it, think about an elk. Their lungs are huge. They're huge compared. Almost, I can't even show you in the screen, but they're huge.
A single lung is about the size of the human torso.
Yeah, about.
Just to give you an idea.
When they're blown up. So think about a bellow. I got to bring my hands into the screen here because I'm so close. But think of bellow when you blow on a fire. It goes, and then you suck air back in. And it's the same thing with an elk. You don't have to do this, but if you want to sound as realistic as possible, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to go. Then I'm going to breathe air back in. It adds a little bit more realism to the call. As you can hear, you don't need to do that. If you do this, it's fine. That's fine. But if you want to add realism to it. So contest bugling, and when I am doing this in the woods, because I do try to sound as realistic as possible, what I do with those chuckles is I make them kind of short and choppy in the beginning, lengthen them out a little bit in the middle, and then bring it back short and choppy at the end. It'll add a little bit more realism to your call. Listen. Hear that? Adds a little bit more realism to the call. You don't have to do that, but again, I just try to teach you everything that I know. Give you something to practice for if you want to be good at calling. Those are just little things like that you got to be thinking of. Let's talk about the cow calls really quick, guys. And if you have any questions, interject as we go along here. If I'm doing fine, just keep it going.
You're rolling right on.
You're right on.
You're giving a lot of information that the East Coast folks don't get.
Okay. I just don't want to take up all your, you guys are hosts. I've dealt with a lot of radio guys and they like to talk a lot, and so I got to wait for their question and their lead too.
No, because if you're on a roll, we don't want to, and we're listening. So don't think that we're not. Okay. Just we're taking all this in at the same time. But if you got it, just roll with it, honestly, because they want to hear you more than they want to hear us. Anyways, they hear us all the time.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me do that. I appreciate giving me the time because I do want to teach everybody as much as I can, and we got a lot to go over. So let's talk about the cow calls really quick. That's the bugles in short. Here's the cow calls. So a cow call goes from a high tone to a low tone. And these are kind of complex. And I want you to really pay attention here because different cow sounds mean different things. And I'm going to talk about that here in a minute, but let's break down a cow sound and what it sounds like. And then we're going to break down what the sounds mean, okay? So a cow call, it's just like a chuckle. We're pressing really hard in the beginning. Instead of coming down short and abrupt like that, we're going to come down slower. They're going to slow it down. And this is what it's going to sound like with a cow call. Slow. Okay. That's basically a cow call. It's just as easy as that. But there's different types of cow sounds. They make little chirps like this. They don't draw it out as long. It's more like this. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, that high.
Oh yeah.
Yep, you're good.
Oh yeah.
Or not.
Yep.
Or my little microphone. So when you're making cow sounds, it's really important to make elk or herd animals. Let's make herd sounds. Don't make it sound like you're just one elk out there. When you're hunting, especially during the rut, and we're going to talk about rifle hunting here in a little bit too, because I've had a tremendous amount of luck calling in elk during the rifle season, even though they're still bugling, but they hear gunshots going off and they get terrified. And I'm going to talk about there's ways to call in those elk, and it's very effective, and most rifle hunters run from this. And I'm going to talk about this technique when we get to talk about techniques. So stick with us. We're a muzzleloader, by the way. So let's go back to the cow calls. They make this short, chirpy sound. Just cut it off a little shorter, not. Okay, what that means, so we're doing this right now, what it so you understand it. When you hear those long, drawn-out calls, and you're watching a herd of elk, and you're sitting back watching a herd of elk, everything's relaxed within that herd. Everything's fine. Calves are out there. That's what you're hearing, those types of sounds like that. When elk are nervous or anxious, not afraid, but when they're nervous or anxious, you're going to hear this sound. A lost calf. How would you feel out in the middle of the woods? You lost your mom. I mean, you'd be just frantic, and that's how these little calves get sometimes. Just making those sounds like, "Where are you, Mom?" But that's an effective call, by the way. Sometimes when you have nothing to lose and everybody else is doing the same thing, that call right there, that you bring the elk to you from. I don't use, that's not my go-to, but that's my last resort is what I use that as. Maybe I should
That's like
use
the
it
kitchen sink.
We got a bull like that a couple years ago doing that technique. When I've been hunting this one section of the ranch, they've been hearing everything in the woods I've been throwing at them for 2 weeks. So I thought, how do I get close to this bull? It's heard everything. I did that little technique and we could move right into the bull. So actually, yeah, he didn't get the shot. He moved at the wrong time in the hunter. We didn't get him, but we called him in. He was close enough to archery. So, but he didn't get the shot on that one. So understanding what they mean. I didn't know this back in the 80s when I started elk hunting. I didn't know what the short, abrupt, those little choppy chirps sounded like or what they meant. I didn't know what the long ones meant compared to that one. So right there, you're ahead of the game walking to the elk woods this year, just knowing that one little thing. And why is that important? Because it's important because when I'm moving in on a herd of elk and I hear them making those short little choppy chirps like that, we're playing a psychological chess game in their mind with them, okay? When I hear that, I want them to think your anxiety's high, so's mine. You bring your anxiety level to their level, and it starts to relax them. And that's what you want to do. You want to relax them. So I'll save that part when I get into hunting techniques here in a minute. But let's go back to the cow calls. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself with some of the techniques.
You're fine.
I want to save that. What's that, Steve?
I said, you're just fine.
Okay. So I've had this call for years. Wayne Carlton had developed this call back in 1987 or 88. It was called a fighting cow call. And what it really is, it's a mature cow sound. I love these open reeded calls like this. And there's several out in the market. Rocky Mountain Game Calls. I think theirs is actually a little easier to use. It doesn't stick on you. Native by Carlton. He sold his name to Hunter Specialties, but he started a new company called Native. That call is very effective, and it's kind of roughed up right here. So the problem with this call, you get a little bit of spit in it, and it sticks on you. So when you're right in the heat of the moment, these are my actual calls that I use in the woods, guys. This one's got blood on it. I don't know if you can pick that up on the camera right there.
Yep.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
got
Oh,
blood
yeah.
on it. Where's my backpack? I just noticed that. I'm going to stick this in my mouth.
Just getting ready for dinner.
That's it.
So, anyway, but these calls right here are my favorite elk calls of all the calls, and for a couple of different reasons. It's elk are herd animals, and elk live in a society where it's a hierarchy system, and they have lead cows with the mature cows within the group that we call lead cows in the industry and in the hunting world, right? Well, it was a lead cow, it was a big cow. Well, the reason we're saying that, and it's true, it is a lead cow. I did a seminar one time at the Valles Caldera Preserve in New Mexico, and there were literally probably 300 to 500 elk. I couldn't count them all in this big caldera. It's like a big volcano that's now fertile ground, and they have horses and elk, and it's a preserve people can put in to hunt it. You can put in for 25. Excuse me, sorry. You can put in for $25 and have a chance to hunt these big elk, and there's so many elk. As a matter of fact, I counted over 100 elk driving through that ranch, 100 branch antler bulls, and I quit counting and within 5 miles, and I quit counting after I counted 100. That's how it just was too many to sit there and look these people. Wanted to enjoy my trip through there. But so I'm watching these elk. I'm staying in this little cabin. I'm doing the seminar the next day. We're doing it outside so I can show people how to set up and stuff. It's pretty cool. And I'm watching the elk in the morning. The sunlight's just starting to come up over the horizon. And the elk are now just starting to disperse, go into their little, and I knew this beforehand, but this kind of just solidified what I've already known. So I'm thinking, okay, what elk are going to break up where? How do they know who's with who out of all of these elk? They're all intermingled together. So they started breaking up into groups of 20, 10, 15, and just all going up into the hills to go bed for the morning, right, in the day. But I noticed, and this just solidified, like I said, what I already knew, was these open-reeded calls make mature cow sounds. Any bite and blow call on the market, with the exception of Glenberry's sleazy cow call, makes, and he's using an open reed, just uses a apparatus that squeezes on top of this open reed, but it also makes that mature sound. And it's a mature sound that elk follow. Elk, those cows, you got to remember something. Those elk, those cows, for thousands of years, have known the way to go up into the summer feeding grounds, and then when it starts to snow, they know how to get out of those mountains to go back down into the winter grounds. And those calves are dependent on their knowledge and other elk, their knowledge how to get back and forth through evolution. And they're apt to follow that mature sound over a calf sound. They live in a hierarchy system within every herd. I don't care if it's 5 elk or 10 elk or 20 elk. There's probably a couple of lead cows within those. I'm going to hit the bloody one. So, bloody one.
Proof that it works.
This is how it sounds. It's a different sound than this.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of close, but it's a different sound. Generally speaking, these diaphragms, I'm lucky enough to have this one here. It has that nice low nasally sound to it. As a matter of fact, Rocky Jacobson contacted me today. I've got to scoot down to the factory this week, but I'm so busy. We're developing a new one, a triple reed, where we have that low. We were messing around with them last fall. I got a couple from him. We made some, but they're not low enough. I just like that. I'm a freak about the pitch, and I like that. And the reason I like that pitch is because it's a mature cow. It's really important to know that. Bulls want to breed a cow, not a calf. But calf calls are just as important to know to make those sounds, because now we're making herd sounds. We're not just making a solitary sound out there. And I wear a couple around my neck. This one doesn't stick as bad. Wayne Carlton, Native Calls, calls this the green weenie. So if you ever stuck a green weenie in your mouth, you can, there you go.
Yep.
How to use these calls. And a lot of people see them, they get intimidated by them. But I've taught thousands of people working sportsman shows over the years, since the 80s, since this call was developed, how to use this call. So what you want to do, you just want to grab it like this, because if I grab it like this, it makes it really low sound, which is good at times. And I'll talk about that during hunting techniques. When you're calling them in, you want to be close. You don't want to be super loud. There's a time to get those elk to start hunting for you, right? So what you want to do at times, and you know Jay Scott at all, Steve?
Oh, yes. I know him.
Okay. So Jay and I were talking one year back in the late 90s, and Jay does that. He even perfects it even more than me, is in my opinion. But Jay, he cups it like this and just makes a real, where you can just barely hear it. You know, just barely hear it. Those elk start
his little
hunting
mouse whisper, I think is what he used to call it.
Yeah, and he's very effective with it. And you know, this elk world is a small world. You grew up in that area. You know all these guys up there, the Randy Ulmers and all the Ulmer families, and been running around there for years. I got blood on my hand. Hey,
like I said, it's just proof it works.
It does. Proof's in the freezer, right? Calling a lot of bulls on it too. I tasted even. So anyway, getting back to this, how to use it is I like to use it like hold it like A-OK. Illustrate that. A-OK. Put the barrel in here, let the sound out. A-OK. And what you're going to do is you're going to put one of your two teeth right here, just rest it very lightly right here on the reed. I mean, feather light, just till that presses down. Just till that presses down. Just very lightly. And right up in here, you're going to hit that high note. You got to find that sweet spot. You're going to hit that high note and just very lightly blow into it with air. And if I come to the end more, it'll be a little higher. Just find that little sweet spot, but you want to start out with that high note, guys, okay? And what you want to do then is make that high note, and like a trombone slide it in, go from a high tone to a low tone, and run out of breath. When you get these calls, by the way, the rubber band comes back sitting like that. I like to roll them forward, and I run my lip right to that rubber band and run out of air. Oh, you can see that. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh yeah, it was clear.
Long drawn out. Everything's fine within my universe. Everything's fine. Come on over here. We got a buffet of girlfriends. It's okay to have a couple different types of brands around your neck, because every one of them make different pitches, okay? And that the different pitches are a good thing, because now we're making herd sounds. We sound like a buffet of girlfriends. We sound like a reason that a bull wants to be with you, okay, when you're calling in elk. And we'll talk about hunting techniques in a minute and how I use these calls. Same thing. I helped develop one with Rocky where this has got holes through the chamber right here, but there's actually holes right up and through here, this chamber, where there's an air chamber right here. And this appears like it is, but it's not. But it allows the air out. So like what Jay was talking, Steve, the those little tiny soft calls. Yep. It just allows that automatically. So they make calls where that makes that easy to happen, to make them really soft and quiet, so those elk start hunting for you.
Yeah, just a nice little finesse.
Yeah, exactly. But I have called in elk as far as I could possibly hear them come to this call. I mean, cover at least almost a mile to come to me to this call. I remember I was hunting in Colorado one time, and I was telling the guy that I was with you, the outfitter was out of Missouri, and nice guy and all, but he was an outfitter, but he really didn't know elk psychology and all that. And I told him how effective this call was, how I've called in elk as far as I could hear him. And he's in the truck just like, yeah.
Yep, okay. Whatever.
Like just, yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
So I had my cameraman was with me, and Johnny Skidmore. And so John Skidmore was with me, and he hunted quite a bit with Fred Eichler like a year before. He'd run around Alaska with Fred Eichler for I don't know, about 6 weeks, 2 months or so. And he just loved Fred, and they all got along great. And Fred and Michelle are good friends of mine. I've known them for a long time, especially Michelle. Her father invented Zues Broadheads. And anyway, so I had this cameraman. He said, I'd never heard an elk bugle before. So we went out elk hunting, and so I told the guide, I said, hey, mind if I start calling? He said, yeah, go ahead. So I started hitting this call, and I heard a bull bugle. We heard one way, way up on the mountain. This is in southern Colorado, way up on the mountain. And finally, he came out of a little opening in the not sagebrush, the oak brush, those little oak trees up there. And you could see his mouth. Have you ever seen somebody shoot a shotgun in a distance? They go, then you hear boom a couple seconds later. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's how far this bull was. That's how far he was. So you go, he'd open his mouth, and then we would hear the repeat of I called that bull in. It took me about 20 minutes. He came down that mountain, and he came within 3 yards of us. The first hour we were elk hunting there in Colorado. And came within 3 yards. John Skidmore was just shaking. He said, I can't believe this. This is so exciting.
Oh, that's the coolest feeling in the world, having a big bull right there like that.
Yeah, it wasn't a big bull, Steve. To somebody who'd never seen one, it was a small 5-point.
Any bull at that point's a big bull.
Yeah. So, but I asked the outfitter, I said, what kind of bull you want me to shoot on video for you to be represented here? And he said, well, I'd like you to shoot at least a 320 bull. Well, the guys from Wildlife Innovations were there. The Buspis boys were there. They flew in on their private plane. They were in the same ranch, and they killed a little 5-point. But they said that was the biggest bull they'd seen all week there. And I hunted there a day and a half. I called in 13 bulls in a day and a half within archery. But this guy wanted me to kill a big bull. I got lucky. So I hunted a day and a half. So we hunted that night. We hunted the next day. At the end of the next day, I killed this bull. It was a good bull. It was about a 350 bull.
Nice. Which is really good for that area.
Yeah, and the reason I called it in, Steve and Trevor, is because I cow called him in. He came into cow calls.
Yep.
So I even did this last year. I was hunting with a doctor out of Mississippi, an orthopedic doctor, and he wasn't quite ready, and I wasn't quite ready. I didn't think the bull was going to come in this fast. But we moved in on an elk. We heard bugling, moved in on him. I set up, started cow calling. Well, the cows are coming to me. Have you ever seen, if you're a whitetail hunter, during the period of time where the does are coming into heat, but they don't want to be bred yet. So they're kind of running away from the bucks to get away from the bucks because they're just not ready to be bred, but the bucks are running the does. Well, there's the same thing with elk. There's a point of time in September where those cows just don't want to be bred yet. So they're running to get away from the bull, and they want to be around other elk to hopefully get his attention off of her. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But if he gets into a big group, now all of a sudden eyes are off of me, and I'm safe until I come into heat, right?
Yep.
He's going to leave me alone.
Drug him into the bar.
Yep. And so I start cow calling. I'm in the bar, and I'm cow calling, get down in here, lady. And she runs in, and well, guess who's behind her?
Yep.
It was about a 370 bull, and we weren't set up for him. And the first morning I was with him, don't worry, the next night he killed a nice 6x6 the next night.
And just to kind of clarify especially for a lot of the East Coast guys who've never been around elk, you say 370 bull, and equivalents of whitetail, you'd be looking at, 180, 185 inch whitetail.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
kind of puts it into perspective when he says 370. It's not a small bull. That's a shooter by anyone's standards.
Exactly, Steve. And so a 400 bull we would compare to a 200-inch whitetail.
Exactly.
Kind of a thing. Kind of if you're counting inches. But listen, when you're going elk hunting, any elk is a trophy elk. And if you're spending the money to go elk hunting, and if you can go home with some meat, I'm telling you what, you can't eat the horns. You've heard that saying. You can't eat the horns or the things hanging underneath them there, but hey, you can, I guess.
Well, you can. Well, Rocky Mountain oysters. Yep, yeah. Literal.
They say they're good, so.
Yeah, well, whoever says that, let them. They can have all of them.
Yeah, I'll donate them with ease. No sweat off my back.
Yeah. So these are some of the elk calls. One more elk call I do want to touch base with really quick, because you'll hear this short and abrupt one. it's just like a chuckle or a grunt, high pitch to low pitch, but it's really fast.
Yeah,
it's their warning call. This is the whitetail version of a snort for an elk.
Kind of like a bark.
That's it.
Yep.
If you hear that, it's loud, it's abrupt.
Game over.
If you hear that, you do it also. Learn how to bark. Talking about relaxing them. So I've had elk do this to me. They'll go. Then go right into a chuckle. They're nervous, but they're not sure. So I'll do the same thing, and they think, well, that guy kind of sounds like me, and they start to relax a little bit. It's all about, especially if you get them broken up a little bit, to relax them so you have that second opportunity, possibly get a shot. And then we're going to talk about elk hunting techniques here in a minute, but let's talk about what do you do to come hunting out west for the first time. And I'm going to talk about that right now. So get your notepad out.
Dive right in.
First thing, I've never met this man personally, and I've sold one hell of a lot of his books. And you can look on Amazon.com and buy this book really cheap, really cheap. You can buy them used nowadays because some of the information on it might be a little outdated. But elk psychology, elk behavior is the same as it was thousands of years ago. So where I'm going with it, it's a book called Elk and Elk Hunting by Hart Wixom. So it's H-A-R-T is his first name, and then the last name is W-I-X-O-M, Hart Wixom, Elk and Elk Hunting. It's one of the best books I've ever read on elk hunting. And over all the years, like I said, I've never met Hart, but I've told you I've sold a lot of his books. And I love his method for hunting, talking about elk psychology and elk biology all at the same time. Why do elk go where they go? Why do they do what they do? And then the psychology of elk hunting them. And that's what we're going to get into here a little bit. I'm not going to have you bring out incense and tea leaves. We're not going to go zen on you here or anything like that. but I do want to talk about there is an art to it. Okay. So I told you elk are herd animals. They're safety in numbers with elk. But also you have to understand why elk go where they go and what they do, and where you're going to find elk. That's the biggest thing. You're going to go to Colorado this year for the first time. Where do I go? What do I do? Do I just find the woods and drive around, look for elk tracks and go hunting? You can do a lot of scouting in your own house before you ever leave the door to go hunting. And there's so many tools available to you now compared to what I had. All I had back in those days was a topo map and National Forest Service maps. That's all I had. Even when I started hunting back in your grounds, back in Arizona, in the 1990s, Steve.
Yeah, that's all you had was the USGS topos.
That's all we had. We didn't have Google Earth. We didn't have all
OnX.
OnX, and we didn't have all of that stuff that's available to you now. And they're outstanding tools, by the way. And I highly recommend you get them, especially if you're going to spend that kind of money to go out west. Get those tools. But there's specific things we're looking for, everybody. Okay. So elk are opportunists. If you're in Lemhi Valley in Idaho, south of Salmon, there's these big mountains on each side, and down in the valleys are just agricultural alfalfa fields. And I guarantee you, there's elk that will travel 5 miles out of those mountains to come every night to go down eat in those hay fields, and then come morning, they go right back up. But in a lot of places that I hunt, they don't have that. So how do you hunt places in Colorado, Arizona, Utah, Montana, Oregon, Washington? How do you hunt those elk that don't have those things available to you? And we'll talk about that other part of it in a minute. And we'll also talk about hunting the Southwest, because Southwestern bulls act a little bit different than hunting in Oregon, Washington State, Montana, Idaho. I'm sitting in Idaho right now, my place up in Idaho. And those elk don't act like they do down there. And we'll explain that as we get into some of these hunting techniques. So elk are opportunists. I'm going to talk about hunting right now. I'm going to talk about hunting the northern part, not the southwest desert states. This is hunting more the north, but I still use these techniques down in the southwest for the simple reason they want to get out of the sun. They want to be cool. They're big animals. They get hot. So what I focus on particularly is this. When I'm looking at a map, I'm looking at north-facing slopes with headwater drainages. And how you find that, you can just find that on a National Forest Service map. What you do is you're going to find a blue line. Let's grab this right here. You're going to find like a blue line. I don't have a pen on me to draw on this thing, but you're going to find a blue line. And anything that goes this way, goes up toward the map, that's going to be a north-facing. Think of drawing a line right now. That's going to be starts here, comes up this way. That's going to be a north-facing drainage. Anything that for a blue line, like a creek, that's what I'm saying, a creek or a water source that starts here and comes down is a south-facing. Okay? And the reason I'm saying that, I'm going to use this little napkin here, this little cup holder, whatever it is.
It's a good example, actually.
The reason I'm going to say this is this. So let's say every day the sun comes up in the east, right here, and it comes around the earth and it sets in the west, right here. And you can see right here where it's more light on this side, kind of darker on this side, because I got the window open right here. So it's a good example. So what happens is that sun comes up in the east and sets in the west. So this side of the mountains, especially the southeastern side, gets more sunlight. In the springtime, you look around, even in the southwest, you look around. Well, there's southwest is a different animal. Let's scratch what I just said. But up in Montana, yeah, do you know what I'm saying? I mean, the monsoon's coming July, right? It's green. It's green going into the rut. But up in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana, parts of Wyoming, what happens is Colorado, even northern Colorado, what happens is the sun comes up, it gets more sun exposure on those southern facing slopes. So what happens is in the springtime, it's all beautiful and green on that south facing slope, eastern facing slope. But what happens is the summer starts to wear on, those grasses get burned off and they become what they call secondary grasses. And on the north facing slope, because it gets less sunlight on this side of the mountain, over on this side, those grasses are able to grow up and become what the biologists call primary grasses. Why is that important? Because elk in the summertime they have got to store as many fat reserves as possible in order to live through the winter, to get through the starvation period of late November, early December, all the way through March, April. They got to go through that starvation period in order to survive and carry on the evolution of elk. That's what it's all about. So in the wintertime, those elk on the north-facing slopes in the summertime and fall, early fall, you're going to find in the wintertime when those snows are deep and they can't get down to the grass and they're going to die if they don't move, they're going to move over to the southern slide. And they're going to get to those grasses because the snow isn't as deep and they can get to those what they call now secondary grasses. They might never have as many nutrients as the primary grasses on the north side, but on the south side, that's where you're going to find them. So if you're late season elk hunting, a lot of times this is where you're going to find the elk down here because it gets more sun exposure. It keeps them warmer. They don't have to burn as many calories in order to stay alive. They can eat less and stay alive, and they still have some source of nutrients in those secondary grasses. So if you're hunting, like if you go up around Pie Town, those elk actually go up on Allegra, that big mountain on the south side of Pie Town. They actually go up in those mountains because it gets the slope of that mountain gets more sun exposure, and they can eat the mahogany and eat the grasses that are exposed in that region.
And in that particular area, when it does snow and you have those heavy snows, that terrain works out where they can come over that and work their way below the snow or the snow line there. And then you start looking for them in the bottoms, working that heat one side or the other.
Yep. So exactly. And you got to go where they're going, but you have to understand what you're looking for before you ever leave your kitchen table at home. When you spread all this stuff out, is before you. So what I start doing before I start going looking for a state to hunt, I want to put the best odds in my favor. First of all, we're going to be putting in for states like Arizona, Wyoming, Utah. Now, Wyoming's closed, I think, as a couple days ago, but you can still put in for Utah. I don't know when you're going to air this, but put in for Utah, Arizona, and a lot of those states, Oregon, and start putting in for areas that are kind of hard to get. And when you get a tag, you got a good chance of getting an elk. But what I'm looking for specifically, when you only have 1 or 2 weeks to go elk hunt a year, and I've been in this boat, I haven't worked in the industry where I can take off a month at a time and go elk hunting. But if you've been like me, where you only have 1 week to 2 weeks to go elk hunt, you got to really do things to put the odds in your favor before you even leave your house. So when I started elk hunting, I've met a lot of guys over the years that have been really successful hunting. You always hear the saying that 10% of the hunters are killing 90% of the game, typically. My point is they're always, I don't know if that works out right with the math, but hunters that always go out there every year and they're always killing something.
Yep.
And I know hunters, and when I had my archery shop, I know guys that came into that archery shop and been hunting elk their whole life and never had a shot. What is the difference between the guys that are always going out killing stuff and the guys or gals that are going out there just hunting every year? And I'll tell you what it is. It's what we're talking about right now. It's putting those odds in your favor before you even leave your kitchen table. So when you go elk hunting, you want to focus on north-facing slopes, headwater drainages. And what I mean by that is where the water starts coming out of the side of the mountain, and it's going to be nice and marshy and lush and green and cool, and there's going to be primary grasses around. That's where you're going to find elk. When you in the Southwest, and we're going to get into that here in a second. Hang with, because this is your wheelhouse.
You're good, Steve. You're good.
Okay, but where you're hunting out in most mountainous states, that's what you're looking for. And you want to be around the food source, and that's where the food source are. That's where the cows are starting to store fat reserves. Not only do they have to sustain their own life, but they're going to have to sustain the calf that they're going to be carrying inside of them all winter long. So they got to provide two different food sources for both her and. So getting fat is very critical. And where the cows are going to be, that's where the bulls are going to be. And, any good whitetail hunter will know a lot of times you scout the does during the summer because the bucks are going to find those does. And same thing, I grew up hunting whitetail, so that's how we used to do it. Things might have changed a little bit in evolution, but that's how I do it out western still. So,
they still chase them.
Yeah. And guys still chase girls for the most part. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Well, we won't go there, but no.
Yeah. If we were deer, we'd all be dead.
That's right.
True story. Creatures of habit.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's what I look for, and that's in a nutshell. North-facing slopes, headwater drainages, and that's why I look for it. Now, you could be driving through elk woods. We're driving, let's say we pull into Colorado, never been there in our life. We're pulling into a unit. You're thinking, man, look at this. All looks just so beautiful around here. There's tracks right here. There's a couple rubs over there. But have strategic places. So what I have on a map, and it's a blank map. I apologize. So let's say this is a little area right here. I marked the spot on my map A with a highlighter. I'm old school. Mark it A. Now mark the spot over here B and C and D and so on. So when I go elk hunting, if nothing's happening in A, I get the hell out of there and I go over to B. If nothing's happening in B, I'll go to C and I'll go to where the elk are. I don't sit there and put up a wall tent and expect to be there for the entire time. I'm there for 2 weeks. You want to be able to be mobile, to be able to get to the areas you want to get to. And then common sense also, you can hike in 20 miles, but you're not going to get an elk out without it spoiling in the fall 20 miles on your back.
Absolutely.
You got to be prepared to have contact a rancher or an outfitter and say, hey, if I get an elk, can I get you to come in and help me pack it out if you want to go in that far? Or just plan your trips where you can see on the maps or in the National Forest Service map, there are little squares, and each square is 1 mile. So you can count the miles that you're kind of going in there and determine, I could probably get an elk out in 5 miles without without it spoiling. It's going to be a lot of work, but I can get it out, especially if you bone it off of the meat. You could get it out in a couple trips with a couple guys. So you got to be able to plan to make sure you're able to get those elk out. And then the other thing, now we're talking DIY stuff here. If you don't have the resources, of course, you can always call an outfitter. And I've been guiding for the last couple of years for an outfitter. I've been having a lot of fun doing it. I've been having a little rough time drawing some tags. I could go out, but there's not another opportunity that I can go out and call in. I called in 8 bulls to a kill last year. And so there's not a better opportunity to go out and call in elk and have those opportunities and learn all I get to learn. And you know, it's just a lot of fun. Let's talk about elk hunting techniques here a little bit. And we're going to talk about early season. We're going to talk about the peak of the rut. And we're going to talk about postseason and into the rifle muzzleloader seasons. You guys have any questions at all?
No, you're rolling right along.
Nope, you're good.
Okay.
It's perfect.
In the Southwest, I do want to go back really quick. Let me digress. I apologize. In the Southwestern regions, up in the north states, like where I'm at here, I'm looking at beautiful Lake Coeur d'Alene right out my window right here. And up in this drainage, there's a creek, and there's another one across the lake. There's a lot of water. Water is abundant in Montana, in most areas in western Montana, Oregon, Washington. You know, it's the only rainforest in the country along northern California, Oregon, Washington, on the west side of Interstate 5 along the coast. And those are Roosevelt elk, by the way.
Right.
But when you get even more east, you get into the Rocky Mountain elk, and how they determine that in the books is I-5 is the corridor. So the east side of I-5, they're considered Rocky Mountain elk, even though there's the Roosevelts, right. And they interbreed.
Yeah, it's a
Rocky Mountain
hybrid.
and the Cascade Mountains. Yeah, hybrid. Yeah. So, but elk are elk, and if you want to talk about Roosevelts, we can. But let's kind of just stick with Rocky Mountains right now. But Southwest, let's talk about this particularly. In the Southwest, water is not abundant. Grass is, for the most part, you got good feed down there and good grass, and there's a lot of it, you know, after the monsoons hit especially. But in the Southwest, water is not abundant, and elk are dependent on water. And of course, they need it to live. So I found one of my favorite techniques for hunting water tanks. And Steve, jump in here because you grew up in that area and even know it better than I do. But I've had a lot of luck down there too. But a couple of the techniques that I use is I like to scout the water. And the elk are on the water, let's say 4 a.m. You'll hear them down there. They'll be bugling.
Wallowing,
and if they're giving away their
around.
position, great. Yep, splashing around. So let me pull out my little blank map here again. Let's say a water tank is right here. But the elk are going to start moving off of that water tank. As soon as that sun starts hitting the horizon, they're moving off of that water tank, and they're slowly going up to their bedding grounds. And what I like to do, and I learned this technique in 3A3C, your country,
yep,
over there by Sholo, Arizona. What I would do is I would follow those elk. I'd stay far enough behind them to about where I started hearing them bugle, about right where it was daylight, okay? And I would mark that. I'd work my way up to where where I heard them bugle about right where daylight started kicking in, where it was legal shooting light. And then what I do is I mark it on my GPS. Because the next morning what I do, I know they're coming off of this. I get the wind in my favor, and I start coming across in a different area, and I beat them to that spot. And usually when these elk are moving up, they're usually a lot of times not in single file, but they're in a group. The bull's always behind the cows. Not always, but the majority of the time.
Right, they're pushing.
He's behind the cows, and he's following them to the bedding grounds. So you want to hang back. Let the cows, let them kind of go, let them go. And then what I do is I'll get set up, or I'll have somebody set up in front of me, and then what I'll do is I'll hit my cow call. And a lot of times, boom, he just lights up. And if he's not coming to you, that's when I try not to bugle until I absolutely have to. I don't know where I put my grunt tube. It doesn't matter. But what I do then is if he's coming up, he's not coming into the cow calls. What I'll do this. Little spike squeal like that. Nothing fancy. Throw all that crap out the window, all that championship calling, because that's not what's going to get you an elk in your freezer.
Agreed.
What I'm telling you right now is not championship calling. There's going to be thousands of people out there that are going to go out this year. They're going to kill an elk. They're going to call it in, and they never thought about entering some stupid contest. Like, it became pretty good at calling, but that's not what's going to get you an elk in your truck. So keep that in mind. Just that little squeal. And so you got to think about a bull here for a minute. You know, he's got all of his cows, and all of a sudden he hears that little squeal. And if it's a big bull, you're sure as hell not going to intimidate him. What he's going to end up doing, he's going to try to come over to get you away from the herd, and you're going to get a shot. And that technique has worked time and time for me again.
Absolutely.
Now, if you're a Cameron Haynes or a Steve or Randy Ulmer, all these big elk gurus, and you're not as big as I am, you can run after those damn elk. And what those guys do is they hear those elk, they find out what direction they're moving,
and they try to cut them off.
And they just run around them to cut them off.
Yep.
And they just, because the elk are moving slow, if they were being chased, believe me, there's no keeping up with them. Cameron Haynes couldn't keep up with them. Okay. And Cameron's an animal. I've known him forever. But what they do is they run around them. Seriously, they will actually just run, jog to get around them, get in front of them, cut them off. And the elk are giving a lot of these guys killing big bulls don't even use a call. They just let the elk give away his position. You sneak in and kill them. There is nothing wrong with that technique.
Yeah, it's effective. But
there's a lot of big elk on people's walls, people that we all know down where you grew up, that have big bulls on their walls, and they never
called a day in their life.
Nope,
but at the same time, if you're like me, I don't like to run that much, especially in those mountains. So I'm a very big fan of the let's go play the spike. And I took 2 of your cows and we're running off and we're going to go have a good time and piss the bull off. And he's going to come in and want to kick my butt. And we'll set the ambush at that point.
Right.
That's been our private strategy for a long time.
And what Steve just said right there is what I'm talking about. We're playing that psychological chess game with these elk. And we're making them believe something. We're creating an illusion to try to get them to come in so we can harvest the elk. I mean, that's what we're doing here. And when you're calling any animal, I don't care if it's a coyote. You go coyote hunting this winter, coyote, turkey, deer, elk, goose. I don't care, whatever you're calling. What you're trying to do is you're trying to create this illusion of another animal or a dying animal. You're trying to strike a neuron in their brain, just like fishing. When you fish, you cast a lure, right? And you try to get them to bite on it, and you try to lure them in. It's no different. We're casting sound, trying to get them to bite on the sound and try to get them to come in so we can harvest the animal. It's as simple as that. And certain sounds, the animals bite on more than others. That's why this is my favorite lure, and we talked about why I like to use it. That low nasally tone sounds like a mature cow, and elk, bulls especially, want to breed a mature cow, but other cows are apt to follow that mature cow than the calf. But again, the calf cows are equally as important. Let's talk about, this is one of my favorite techniques hunting up in the northern mountains, the northern states. Early season elk hunting. Nothing's going on. It's hotter than heck. For instance, in Oregon, it starts third weekend in August. And I was hunting with Greg Miller one year. He's an outdoor writer, a whitetail guru back in the Midwest. And I was working for Hunter Specialty. We were doing videos. And anyway, I called in 5 bulls that week, which I thought was tremendous, being it was as hot as it was. And he got a bull. Wasn't a giant or anything, but I've called in some of the biggest bulls I called in all year long during this time of year. And I'm going to show you a tip and a technique that I've used that has been very successful for me over the years. And I call it, let me find my grunt tube here. I call it my big bull, little bull technique. So when nothing's going on, it's third week in August, archery season just opened. The elk aren't cranked up yet. They're not really bugling. Most of them they polished off their horns. Now when they shed their horns, when they shed the velvet and they rub off the velvet, their testosterone's at pretty much peak levels to start breeding cows. So it's like they're dressed for the prom, but they don't have a date yet because the cows aren't coming into heat. But every once in a while, a cow will come into heat a month early. Okay? Just like if a cow is not bred in September, she'll come back into heat again 30 days later in October, and you're going to have a second rut if she wasn't bred, especially low to bull cow ratio areas. Okay? She's going to come in, she's going to be hopefully get bred. If she's not bred in October, she's going to come back into heat again in November. And studies have shown elk have come into heat into January, as far into January. That's pretty rare. But the problem you run into, just so you understand elk biology here, if a cow is bred in August, that calf is going to be born a month early in the springtime. And what can happen is if it's a bad winter, deep snows, that calf's probably going to die of hypothermia. You think about it laying there in the snow with its afterbirth and freezing, and it's probably going to die. And the same thing, if a calf is born in October or November, a month later, because their cows are bred in October or November, even further out, you've got a calf that's a little baby going into those harder winters, and its chances of survival are not as good as one that was born in September. So kind of keep that in mind. They do come into heat. So you got early season. Sometimes cows do come into heat. And what I try to do is create a frenzy. And I call this my big bull, little bull technique. So I've done my scouting. I know there's elk in the area. I'm sitting there with Trevor. Trevor comes out hunting with me, or Steve, they come out hunting with me. I'm going to get the wind. I don't like to get the wind right in my face, coming straight at me like this, because when an elk comes in to circle me as a caller, I don't know if he's going to come this way. I don't know if he's going to come this way. But if I got a crosswind going from my left to my right like this, or in your screen, probably the opposite. But if I got a crosswind like this, and I know the elk are out here somewhere, I'm going to set, and I know that the wind's going this way, I'm going to set Steve or Trevor about a 45-degree angle to me, probably about 60 to 75 yards out, maybe even 100. I'm going to set them out there quite a ways, because what's going to happen is these elk are going to come in silent during this time of year. They're not going to come in all cranked up, but they want to come in out of curiosity, and they want to see what's going on. So a lot of times we just catch them as they're sneaking around me to try to, remember, they pee on themselves. They're trying to catch my wind. They want to see what kind of a bull I am before they get into trouble. So these guys, if they're sitting out there at 70 yards, they might get a 30-yard shot if he's circling it at 100 yards, right? And this is where decoys are effective. You could set up a decoy behind these guys. I wish I brought this. And we're going to have to do this again as we'll do a shorter podcast of this right before elk season.
A little recap.
Some decoys. And I'm going to show you what I've been using the last couple of years. I got this one decoy by Native Calls, and it's got an actual face on it. You can turn it, and it's actually got the face of an elk. And man, when they see this, it's pretty cool. I've had so much luck the last couple of years playing around with this thing. But anyway, I'm setting you guys out there, and I'm doing my calling. Now, this is exactly what I do, and I do it for a reason. I always do a big bull, little bull. We want the elk to think that there's a cow in heat, something's going on over here, and they usually get up out of their beds. Now, these big bulls don't have their cows yet, right? So a lot of times what's happening is these cows are just getting up. These bulls are just getting up, just checking you out, out of curiosity.
They want to set that pecking order.
Yeah, exactly, Steve. They're going through their pecking order, just like, and to figure out who the big bull's going to be, who the big daddy's going to be before the rut starts. So in one direction, if the wind's going this way, I always throw my smallest bugles down this way, my biggest bulls up this way. So when we talked about adding a lot of voice and all that stuff, I do that during this time of year, the growling and all that. I'm going to make that this bull, the little bull that the bull's going to come in on, because I don't want to intimidate him too bad. Make it like a little weenie bull. And then I'm going to create this illusion of all these cows. Now, I don't know if this mic's going to be able to pick it up, but when we're making cow sounds, I'm making them like this. I'm going, close your lips.
Yep.
Sound really soft. You can make create this illusion of a lot of elk just by closing your lips, making it louder. Then I got several elk. You add these to it, and you got that aspect to it as well. I always try to throw that cow call down in the direction that you guys are sitting, 45 degrees from me. I always throw it down that way so that elk's wanting to come to mama. And usually that's what they get cranked up about. So this is what I do. Knock it off.
Yep.
When I'm doing the cow calling sequence, picture this. I usually set up a tree. I set up a tree in front of me, and I got a big branch, and I'm raking as I'm doing the cow calls, and that's imitating a bull raking his horns on a tree, okay? And that creates another sound, another piece of excitement to this frenzy that I'm trying to create. And then what I'll do after I'm done making those sounds, end it again. When I ended it with just a couple cow calls. Done. And I sit there for 10 minutes. I will literally look at my watch, and I won't make another peep for 10 minutes. I will do this at nighttime. I will get there at about 5:30 at night, and we're going to be here all night. We're not going anywhere because we're just sitting on a bank, casting out sound, fishing for elk. Okay, when you drop a pebble into a pool of water, and you got a still pool of water, and you drop a pebble in it, you see those ripples go out. It's the same thing with sound. Those sounds will ripple out, and we're casting that sound out to strike a neuron in their brain. Be confident in your calls. Those bulls will come up, and they'll be curious. I've called in so many bulls this way early season. And when nothing's happening, make it happen. Make it happen. If nothing's happening, you can just go walk through the woods all day long and go on a hike and put on a lot of miles. I know friends that I put on 15 miles today.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love nothing more than having people come out, man, we put in 24 miles. You know, we saw 2 cows and a bull way off in the distance, and that was it. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, why didn't you put in 2 miles and you just saw 40?
Exactly. I'm showing you all how to hunt like a fat man hunts.
Yep.
Like a smart man, not like a fat man, like a smart man.
Smarter, not harder.
It
applies.
We say killers are gonna kill.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, we talked about all those guys going out killing elk every year. Mm-hmm. This is what they're doing. They're not setting up a tent and staying in one area if nothing's going on. Get the hell out of there. You got 2 weeks to hunt, buddy. You better find a different spot to go find an elk to go call. You know, if they're not calling, nothing's happening. Get your butt out of there. Go find a different spot. You know, don't be set up in. You know, it's not a camping trip. You're on elk hunting. And it's fun going on a camping trip too, but you know what I'm saying. I'm talking about DIY type hunting. If you hire a guide, all of this stuff is done. They've done all their scouting.
It's that turkey hunting thing in you too. Anybody who turkey hunts, there's the 2 different people who turkey hunt. There's the runners and gunners, the guys that get after it, and they look for that gobble, and then they're on that bird and they're constantly trying to find that bird. Or the guys that just go out there and they sit and they just call. But it's kind of opposite, I guess, with elk hunting, right? Because the guys that sit turkey hunting, they might not get that gobble, but the guys that are running and gunning and after and being mobile, they're on those birds constantly and they're killing them.
And listen, it's the same way with elk on public land too. You've got to go find them. I mean, I'm talking about early season when nothing's going on.
Right.
You could walk your butt off and never hear an elk, but they were out there. They can hear you. You got to be confident the elk can hear you and that they're going to react to your call. You got to be confident in your calling and knowing what you're doing, and what they're hearing. What they're hearing is there's a bunch of cows over here and there's a couple bulls going nuts. What's going on? I'll guarantee you guys, it's, you know, if you were in a bar and somebody started a fight at the end of the bar, you're going to run on there and see what's going on.
Right.
You know, it's just animal nature kind of a thing, right?
Absolutely.
So just kind of understand the psychological chess game. When nothing's going on, we're just trying to make something happen. Now, listen, when they're bugling and they're lit up, this is how I elk hunt. Let's fast forward to peak of the rut. And this is even Arizona, New Mexico, anywhere in the country right here. First thing I always do, it's okay, we're all hunting together. First thing I always do is this. Always. Boom. An elk just lit up right over there. He just answered me. You know how many guys I've had at this point? I mean, seasoned hunters, TV show guys, sit there and nudge me. Bugle, bugle, bugle. Why? I'm sitting there. I just made a. He answers me back. I'm saying, I love you. He's saying he loves me. I'm saying, come home, come ride home with me in my truck. You know, let's get together here, buddy. I'll give you a ride with my truck. Where I'm going with it is this. There's times to bugle, there's times not to bugle. Always try to cow call first. If that bull answers your cow calls, there is no reason to bugle. Okay. Now, there's not a video out there. You want to, let me digress for a second. You want to sit there after you hear him bugle like that, determine, is he coming closer? Is he coming closer and closer? Then you don't have to really move. You can just kind of get set up, right? But if he's starting to move off on you, or if he's not moving in, there's not a book out there or a videotape that tells you this technique. Get your ass up and start moving in on him, and get on him quick. I mean, when I mean get on him, try to get within that 100 yards. I was hunting last year with a couple of guys, and it was his last night of hunting, and we split up. I had a guide took a buddy of mine. A guide took another hunter. I took his buddy. We're trying to get these guys elk. And he kept looking at his watch, like every 5 minutes, just like we're running out of time. But I got elk bugling. I said, just relax. I said, we have time. We went down in this little draw, busted a couple little bulls that smelled us working in this little canyon. But I heard an elk over there. I said, let's go after him. Still plenty of time left. And he kept looking at his watch. I said, relax. And I don't want to say his name because I don't want to embarrass him. And so we heard the elk bugle, and they said, set up. You know, the guys that were with me, and his doctor buddy who killed the bull a couple days before with me was right with him, you know, with his buddy. And I said, no. I said, gotta go. And as long as we have cover, we can keep moving in. As long as we can have cover. He's giving away his position. We cougar in, set up, did that little cow call. This guy shot a bull, you know, called it in about 20 yards away from him. He shot that bull. Got his first bull ever. So you got to move in on the elk. You got to get in. You don't pussyfoot around. Don't sit there set up at 150 yards when you get your butt in there another 75 yards. I'm a big guy. I'm not quiet. Elk aren't quiet. Don't be afraid of the noise. You're making elk noises.
You just hit a key point to all of it. Everyone tries to be super stealthy on this sneak in climb. If you're in the peak of the rut and you're chasing elk that are bugling, make noise. If you're going to sound like an elk and you're making elk calls, you better sound like an elk as you're moving through the woods.
Yep. Something else to remember too. When you hear an elk, and you're going to hear this in the elk woods, you're going to hear them raking, busting trees.
Absolutely.
It's an aggression. You know, they're fired up, right? They're busting trees or they're rattling horns together. They might be fighting a little bit, but a lot of times you're going to hear them rattling trees, you know, showing their dominance toward you or other elk around them. When they're moving their head like this, sit there in your watching this podcast, move your head around. Look how nothing's still around you. I know this sounds crazy. That's the time to move in on an elk. That's when you can get away with a lot of movement because they're doing this with their head, right? That's the time to move in on an elk. Don't be afraid to move in. I mean, you're going to be able to walk right up and shoot that elk while he's standing there raking. You know, don't have that in your head for a second, but you can move on that elk at that time. He's got all that noise right here in his ears. His head's moving. His eyes are moving. That's the time to move on an elk when when you hear them raking. Try to get in there as quick as you can.
Absolutely.
Let's say I cow call. We're hunting together, third week, peak of the rut. I cow call. I don't get anything to answer me, and this has happened. Nothing's answered, and nothing's answering me at all as far as the cow calls. What I do then is I will bugle. Then I have to bugle. I have to give away my position to try to get them to give away their position. So again, I'm just going to I did all the cow calls. I'm not going to go into that right now. I did all my little series of cow calls. Now I'm going to go. Boom. And elk just answered us. By the way, I might have to do that half a dozen times. I might have to sit here for 5 minutes to try to get an elk cranked up. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't get discouraged if he doesn't answer you. Sometimes it takes you 10, 15 minutes to get a bull cranked. And listen, if they're not answering you right there during the peak of the rut, we talked about, Trevor, how people move. You want to cover ground. This is the time of year you want to cover ground to find an elk bugling. This is the time of year you want to be moving. This is the time of year you just want to be sitting, trying to call an elk to you. This is the time of year that you do want to be moving.
Yeah, and this is an educated move. You're moving on something you know is there. You're not just hauling ass through the woods hoping to stumble across something. Just to make that clear. We're
trying to move on something to get them to crank up or get close enough to hear something. It's big out west. We're not hunting the back 40. And we might have to go walk a half a mile to a mile away now to try to hear an elk bugle over the next ridge, over the next little draw. Hopefully you're kind of up on a ridge, bugling down into these draws is what I would recommend. Into these, north-facing slopes is what I would recommend. Because you can cover a lot of ground from that ridge.
Oh, absolutely.
It take you forever to drive around those little areas. If you're on a ridge,
that sound travels down through there a lot easier than it does up.
Yep. It's and then what you want to do is if you do hear them, let's say you're on a mountain. Another little tip here. If you're on a mountain, let's say that's the mountainside right here. And you hear them, they're not in the bottom, but they're kind of right here. And like right here. Okay. You want to be on the same level they are. Don't be above them. Don't be below them. Something to think about the wind currents in the west. When the sun goes down, there's the sun goes down, the wind drops down these mountains. When the sun comes up, the wind currents come up. The heat currents start coming up. So there's little critical periods of time, especially in the evening, where that sun's starting to come down. You still got some of those wind currents pushing up. You got this cooler coming down, and it really starts to swirl. And in the mornings, the same way. As the sun starts to come up, you got those wind currents coming down. Now those heat thermals are coming up. There's times if you hear an elk bugle and they know they're going to smell you, get your butt out of there. Try for them in the evening when the thermals, they're not going to go too far if you don't push them. Just get out of there and then try to get it where the wind is right and you can get back in on that elk. Don't be afraid to do that.
Good advice.
Another technique that a lot of times they use in the Southwest specifically are tree stands. Just your regular techniques that you're using on whitetails.
First tree stand I ever saw. Never had seen one in my life. And we stumbled up on an old cattle pond out in the middle of the national forest, some lease land. And there was a tree stand over, and I'm going, now who in the... And then it dawned on me, I said, you know what? What's the difference of him sitting in that stand or me putting a brush blind in here 40 yards away?
Mm-hmm. So what you just said is tree stand hunting over water holes. Again, water is not abundant out west. And they have to drink, and they have to drink in order to live. So it is legal in some states. Now, in Unit 10 in Arizona, they made it illegal to hunt elk over water holes.
Right.
So you can't do that. But in a lot of units, you can. So just make sure you know your area. Southwestern hunting, southern Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico. This is an extremely effective technique, and a lot of monster bulls were shot with this technique. And that's just simply set up a ground blind, on the downwind side. Kind of do your scouting the night before, find out which way the wind's going. But you also got to set it up. A lot of these water holes, by the way, they call them, they're dirt water holes. Yep. But out west, they call them tanks.
Yep.
So when you drive up to it, you expect to see, being from the Midwest, the first time I ever, it's up in the water tank. And you go up there and you expect, where's the tank? Oh, this is just a...
No, Joe Tank's just a nice little bulldozed hole in the ground next to the road.
That's all it is. They call it a tank, though. So you want to sound like a local. Hey, where's water tanks? That's You want to sound. Yep. It's not a tank. It's actually just a mud hole water that the elk get into and splash around, and they pee all over it. And a lot of times it stinks, and they will get around there laying it, rolling it, and drink it.
And that's the other thing is, especially when you're hunting down in the Southwest, when you're looking on your maps, you're not going to see X pond. You're going to see Joe Tank. You're going to see Smith Tank. You're going to see Bog Tank. They're not going to label them as ponds or anything like that. It will come up on the map as a tank because it's a renowned spot that is known by everyone. It's a main water source that everyone from biologists to forestry to locals can refer to like you would anywhere else and go, up here by this lake at Point du Hoc. It's just how we know things down there.
Yep. So that's a great point. So when you're seeing that, just be aware of what you're looking at. And Steve hit it right in the head. You're going to see tank, bogey tank over in Unit 9 or, that's right along the road. I'm not going to give away all this.
Yeah, don't give away the good spot. I could say Joe Tank and anyone can go, hey, let's sit right there on the back of the housing development. I've seen big stuff down there, but not anymore.
Yeah. So, but hunting Southwest is a little different. Hunt for water, pattern the elk on the water. That's going to be your best techniques down there. Either sit water or pattern the elk off of the water, or try to intercept them coming to the water, or try to intercept them going back to the water. But one thing that I'm telling you that still to this day works, even though they might be moving off that water, they're still going to go bed on those north-facing little, like Unit 3A3C is pretty roly-poly in most areas, right?
Oh, yeah.
9's the same way. 10's the same way. It's not like Unit 1 or 27, right? But even those little units that they just kind of have that little slope to them coming down off of that north side, that's where the elk are going to go bed. So be aware of that. So you can look at your topo maps and just kind of understand where the elk are going to. And the reason they do that is because they don't get as much sun exposure. They can get a little bit more shade. It'd be a little cooler. Elk are big animals and they get heated up pretty quick. So that's just a little technique to use when you're hunting for elk, and even in the Southwest, kind of knowing where they're going to bed. And talking about beds, I have a lot of people ask me, do you hunt in the afternoon? Now, I know a lot of people have gone out and they hunt in the afternoon. They get their elk. They find them in their bedding grounds. They kill them in the afternoon. Personally speaking, I feel like I have a good opportunity in the evening and in the mornings to kill elk. A lot of times, I don't like to, especially if you're hunting on a ranch or you have a landowner tag, and there's a ranch right next to you. It's like hunting your North 40 there in the Midwest or the Northeast or the East Coast somewhere. Let's just say east of the Mississippi. You're hunting your North 40. You don't want to be walking around your woods busting your biggest deer, running them out in the next farmer's fields.
Exactly.
Places, right? Same thing with elk hunting. You don't want to be busting them out of there. Let them relax. They're going to be coming back there. If you haven't pushed them too hard, they're not going anywhere. They're going to come back. So public land where there's just thousands and thousands of Bob Marshall wilderness up in Montana, I don't like hunting afternoon. I feel like my best chances are in the evenings and mornings, when they're more vocal, when they're moving around more. You can last couple days of the season, you have nothing to lose, go hunt.
Then it's worth it.
I'm not going to tell somebody how not to hunt. Elk have been killed that way. But elk have been killed like Steve and I talked about, a lot of big bulls. People don't even use the calls. The elk are giving away their position. Why call? They're bugling right there. Just sneak in and kill them. Get the wind in your face and sneak in and kill them. I like calling because that's the exciting part of it for me. get them to scream right in your face, come into your clients.
Right.
When they're not bugling, I can get them to bugle. I can make it happen. That's exciting to me. There's, I can think of so many times last year I bugled an elk. And it's just, like I said, just exciting.
Absolutely.
I want to talk about, before I forget it, I want to talk about rifle season muzzleloader.
I was going to ask you on it.
What's that?
I was going to ask you on it because
This is where a lot of people out here will say east of the Mississippi will have more interest because not many of them. There are some diehards that are going to want to take a bow out there, but a first elk hunt, is a little bit more believable if you're taking a rifle or a muzzleloader. So this could be very applicable.
So let's get into the elk psychology here really quick. So the season here in Idaho, where I'm at right now, season starts always October 10th for rifle season.
Right.
And it's about the same way in Colorado, give or take 5 days. New Mexico, Arizona. Well, Arizona's kind of a different bird because they even have rifle season during the peak of the rut in some units. But generally speaking, in the West, let's say October, they start the rifle season. Now, the elk are still bugling. They're still cranked up a little bit. And I made this mistake one year right here in Idaho, just south of me from where I'm sitting here, about 3 hours south of me, where I used to live in Pierce, Idaho.
Which is funny. So Trev, where he's talking is where we put in last year.
Oh, okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, my brother's got a ranch down in that area.
Oh, I'll be darned. Okay. Well, if you guys, I know that country like the back of my hand. Off air, if we ever need any.
Good to know. Oh, we'll be in touch.
Okay. So, and listen, any of your viewers out there, if anybody hears this, I've been hosting TV shows and all that stuff. My nose is not up in the air. I'll help anybody anytime. And you can give out my phone number. I don't care. I'll help anybody at any time. If they need help, have them call me. I'm accessible. I'm not.
Absolutely. But just so everyone knows listening that we're going to go and vet him out first, and then we'll let you know if it, then we'll let you call him and be like,
yeah, he's worth it. No.
Yeah.
We got to check first.
I'm not that famous as where I'm not, where people can't talk to me. I want to help people. Okay. But during the rifle season, they're still bugling, and I've had bulls bugle right here in Idaho during rifle season. And remember one time, and I looked across the canyon, and somebody's using their rifle scope for binocular,
trying to find you.
And I sound like an elk, right? Hopefully we all do, and that stuff happens. So I quit bugling on public land during elk hunting.
Absolutely. And great point. I'm glad you brought that up.
You don't have to wear blaze orange in Idaho.
Exactly.
You can be in full, which I love the freedom of Idaho, right? You don't have to wear it. It's not required. You can wear full camo. Same thing in New Mexico. You don't have to wear blaze orange when you muzzleloader hunt or rifle hunt. You can wear your camo, which I love that freedom. But some people just might call it stupidity. Yeah, probably. But, it's fun to have that freedom, freedom of choice if you want to wear it or not. I usually wear a red hat, by the way, or I usually wear something red on me these days. I'm not that stupid, but I've been stupid.
Well, there are some places, especially up kind of where you're talking, that people shoot at what they hear, not what they see. And I've heard a couple instances, even in Arizona, there have been situations where I heard it was over there. I swore it was behind that tree. I took a shot, not realizing it's someone sitting behind the tree making a call. It's no different than turkey season. Trev got shot at last year.
Really?
It happens. People shoot at what they hear because they think it's in that bush.
First year I ever turkey hunted was in Oregon back in the late 80s. And I had a turkey decoy set up, a hen, and a guy came up to raise his shotgun to shoot the decoy. Even though hens weren't even legal to shoot, he's going to shoot my decoy. And my buddy, thank God, saw him because I didn't see him. And he yelled at him, and thank God he didn't shoot because I was in line of fire.
And that happens when you sound like an animal, like you're saying, even at what elk, it doesn't really matter what it is. Like I've called in more hunters than I've probably called in turkey, especially hunting public land.
Yeah.
Because these guys try and get in on them or whatever the case may be. I mean, I don't use a gobble call. I mean, it's a great tool, but it's that one last thing that you're going to use.
Yeah, it's a last ditch effort.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I don't even carry it, but you call in more hunters than you do anything, like you're saying, during rifle season, bugle and during that.
And there are units that, you know, the over-the-counter units, particularly, like with Arizona, where 3A3C went to a trophy tag unit, so it all became draw, where it used to have some over-the-counter stuff. Unit 1 used to have some. Now it's draw only. But there are those units down there, you know, 3B, where you can get some stuff over-the-counter. And everybody piles into those units because that's a guaranteed tag.
Yeah.
And your chances of calling in another hunter is just as high as calling in a bull. So you got to be very particular and smart about how you're doing it.
Yeah, just be smart. And I'm sure all your viewers are pretty, knowledgeable on all of the hunter safety stuff. But there's some people that aren't. So just be aware
absolutely.
of that. You know.
And I would like to think that everybody listening has got the common sense and pays attention, but there's always that one.
Yeah,
and it only takes one.
Yeah. So let's go back to hunting late season, or not late season, early beginning rifle season, muzzleloader in Colorado. Let's talk about elk psychology for a minute. You're an elk out here, right? There's more human encroachment during the rifle season and muzzleloader season than any other time of year. And you're a bull elk. And right over here where I've been feeding for the last 2 weeks, everything's been fine. All of a sudden a big camp moves in.
Yep.
And they got quads and they got four-wheelers and they got tents and everybody's whooping and hollering and having a good time. You know, and why not? We get a chance to hunt like this and rejoice in the moment. There used to be a day where we used to hunt for food every day. And there were no licenses and there were no seasons. And you could just go hunt to hunt and kill to kill, 100 years ago. And now we have licenses and seasons and management. And we want to be able to rejoice in that hunt. We want to, some of the best moments in our lives are in those campgrounds with our friends and our family, and rejoicing in that moment is important. But you're an elk. And now I've moved away and I'm down in this canyon and I'm listening to all this noise up here going on around me, people driving their quads around. Opening morning, they hear boom, boom, boom all around them. And they're nervous. If you thought they were nervous before hearing all that human activity, all that human encroachment, now I'm hearing booms. Now they're really nervous.
Oh, yeah.
So this technique has been extremely, extremely successful for me. And again, it's like early season rut hunting, only without the bugles. And what I do is I sit up in an area, and I don't even care if the wind's dropping down because I'm hunting with a rifle a lot of times. I'm usually going to get a shot. I sit up on a hillside as much as I can, get up, get elevated, find places where they have shooting lanes. It's really brushy in northern Idaho here, by the way.
Yep.
You can't just, very brushy. I mean, it's almost like the Oregon coast and the Washington coast. It's extremely brushy. It's hard to, as a matter of fact, I don't think I've ever videotaped a kill. When I was a resident here in Idaho, I don't even think I filmed a kill up in this region. I did one time. Take that back. It was a rifle hunt. But I called the elk out into a clear cut. A clear cut is where they clear trees and they have heavy, thick timber alongside of it. And the elk come out in the clear cut in the evenings or mornings to feed, almost like a water hole, and then they go back.
Right.
Water's abundant. Water's everywhere up here. But not to digress. But this is the technique that I use to call elk out. And it's very simple. I cow call. And I do that every 10 to 12 minutes, and I sit and shut up and let the elk hunt for me. But I like to sit up near a wooded area where they can come out to me, but they feel comfortable and are comfortable in the woods. Think about a big whitetail buck. He's not going to walk right out in the middle of that alfalfa field and get shot if you're rattling to him. A lot of times he's going to work his way, sneak his way through the woods, and then try to get around you just like an elk. to try to smell you before they come in and get killed.
Right.
Same thing here. Think about this thing, elk psychology here. So I'm calling in elk, and they're going to try to get downwind of me, and they're going to. That's why I like to have an opening downwind of me so I can actually see them come out. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sit here and do this. That's it. And I will sit there for 10 minutes, not make another peep, and just sit and listen and wait. And I talk about this technique all the time. And then a couple of years ago, there was a little girl out of Montana. She sat around a sportsman show all day long, just picking my brain. She was like, I think 16 years old or something like that. And just her mom just dropped her off, and she would just sit there and talk all day long. She was so excited. And I said, well, listen, I said, if you want, I said, I'll pay for your license and tag. In Idaho, kids 17 and under have a men. They can go hunt elk for about $50 here in Idaho.
Yeah, the
about
mentor program.
I said, I will. I'll pay for your license and tag. If you want to come out, I'll pay for your license and tag, and we'll go elk hunting. I'll take you elk hunting. Really? You'll do that? And she didn't even have a gun or anything. So I gave her a little 30-30 Marlin that I didn't give it to her. I let her use my little 30-30 Marlin. I killed my first deer with in the state of Wisconsin when I was 16 years old. And anyway, so she came out. We went elk scouting like the week before. I got an elk to bugle. I taught her how to bugle. She got a bull to bugle and answer, which was pretty cool.
Right.
It was safe because rifle season hadn't started yet. So here, season had already started like 2 or 3 days later. And I can tell you story after story. I mean, I've called over 100 elk. I mean, I don't want to sit here and bore you with stories. I'd rather tell you about techniques, but I'm just going to tell you about this one story here. So it's rifle season, and I'm sitting there, we're making cow calls, and I'm sitting in this big clear cut, and literally a bull, which is very unusual, comes at the very bottom. It's like 600 yards, starts running up, and it comes down below us about 150 yards, and she's on sticks. I'm saying, you got to shoot it. So I stopped it. She didn't feel comfortable, kept moving. Elk walked into the woods, walked out, and she started crying. And I said, just relax. I said, that bull is in those woods. He heard the cows right here. He's in the woods. He's going to come out at the edge of the woods right before dark because he's afraid. He said, you hear all these quads around us? There's so many people. So you hear all of this around us? And deer season's going on at the same time. So people are shooting deer, shooting elk. I mean, bear hunters are running hounds. I mean, it's a lot of good. I didn't hear any of that, but there's definitely deer hunters and elk hunters at the same time. Gunshots going off all around us. Not close, but I said, that elk's going to come out, but you got to be ready. I said, you got to be able to take the shot when that elk comes out of the woods. You can't mess around. So probably about half hour before it gets legal shooting light, I'm surprised that elk came out. Probably about a half hour later, here comes that bull, comes working out. Feels comfortable, comes working out. I said, here he is. I said, you got to take the shot. And she shot it perfect right behind the shoulder. Beautiful. She killed her first bull elk.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
So, and I'll tell you just another time. I'm sitting one time in Idaho, down by Pierce, Idaho.
Okay.
Along the North Fork River, the Clearwater River. And I'm sitting down, and there's a logging road, by the way, right behind me, about 50 yards. But I like this little bowl right here. I like this little area where I have good shooting. And I know there's elk down here. I know there's elk below me. I know there's elk that can hear all around me. I know there's elk. But I know they're nervous. And I started doing that technique in the morning. Call up 5 cows and a little 5-point. Killed him. Went out that night, did the same thing for my brother-in-law. Called in a little bull for him. He shot it, killed it. Same thing. Cow called him to us. Cow callings. I took the game warden to the same place. Our local game warden that he just got a job in that area. He said, what are you doing? He said, well, I got to work opening morning. I said, what about the next morning? I said, can you get out? He said, yeah. I said, let's go. I took him to that same area, my little honey hole right there. Took him to that same area, called in a little bull for him. Cow called. I mean, just basically turned legal shooting light. Boom. Couldn't believe how quick he shot that bull. Cow calling during rifle season is extremely effective because elk are afraid. Elk are coming to you not because they want to be bred. They're coming to you because they want to be around other elk.
Right.
There's safety in numbers. They want to be around other elk. Heavily hunted areas, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, certain areas are just hunted hard. And to me, the more hunters, the better. The more afraid the elk are, the more I increase my chances of getting an elk, in my opinion. So
makes sense.
Elk are the most vocal animal out of all of the deer species. They cow call all year round. Even bulls cow call. A lot of people just think bulls. No, bulls. That bull I called in to that rifle kill for me that morning came in. Cow calling just like that. Boom, shot him. So, by the way, he caught my wind because he was downwind of me in that little opening, but I was able to get the shot off and kill him.
Awesome.
It didn't matter.
It's so crazy. I can only imagine the stories that you have.
A lot.
I can imagine.
Well, and no two hunts are the same. Just like turkey hunting.
No,
Every
not.
elk hunt's different.
In Idaho one year, I remember we went out, we had all public land tags, called in 3 bulls in 3 days.
Wow.
And it was one year we went down there, we killed 2 bulls in one night. I called in a bull for my buddy, and he was just slapping me, just going, we'd seen him, we glassed him early in the morning. They were on this little bench. We went up there that evening. We glassed them in the morning, going up there. It was so windy. You could hardly hear anything. If you ever stood in like an athletic field where you talk and you'd even yell and it just gets damped out, it's like nothing can hear you. It was that kind of an evening. And I hit this cow call. I cupped it like this with my hand. And like that. And I heard, ooh, 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 ooh. I didn't know if it was a raven, like a crow or a raven way up there, or an elk. So I waited a minute or so and I did it again. And he answered back. And now I hear it was an elk, and so did my buddy Mike. So I said, Mike, get up there. He got underneath. This was a wide open hillside, mountainside like this. And he got behind the only little juniper, and I was sitting down here. He got behind the only little juniper you could kind of get up underneath. And that bull just running down the hill, running down this mountain, not a hill, running down. And just as it got right by Mike, I barked. I just, and he stopped. And it's like a quarter horse where it just slides out underneath him like that, his butt end slides, and he's just looking, and he's just perfect broadside to Mike like this, and Mike shot him right behind the shoulder.
Oh, it's beautiful.
This is at 5:30 at night, and Mike's just, and he just went around the hillside, and we walked out. So Mike came down to me, and he's getting hooping and hollering. I said, Mike, settle down. He said, Dieter, don't move. There's an elk right there, and he's bigger than mine. These bulls were together. I pulled back, and I said, what's the range? Because it's in the wide open, and he has my rangefinder. Our only one rangefinder we're sharing between us, buddies, right? I said, I don't want to move. He didn't want to strip the elk. I don't want to move. And so anyway, I shot under him. I shot underneath him, and the bull ran off. But that evening, I said, we walked around the hill. Mike's bull was laying there. It was about a 320 bull. And he said, it's the biggest bull I ever got. At the time, that was the biggest one. And I said, you take care of him, Mike. I said, it's still early. I'm going to try to get a bull. I said, you need help? He said, nope, I got it. So he gutted out his elk. I went over to, I killed a bull that night. Killed a little 5-point bull.
Nice.
So
that's awesome.
Anyway, had a chance at a 340, but I got a little 5-point. We killed 2 bulls in one night.
Hey, perfect. So that's a pretty awesome epic night as it is.
Memories.
Yeah, but and that was a different bull. He wasn't with those other elk, and it just works. I mean, I'm trying to think if there's any points I wanted to bring up or before we sign off here, but I think it covers about everything. Oh, one thing I did want to talk about. When you do your scouting and you want to put those odds in your favor, and I forgot to bring this up, and I thought about it when I was talking. you want to find units that have at least 20 bulls for every 100 cows,
Right.
minimum.
Okay.
There's some units in Oregon, and they manage it this way. There's some units in Oregon that have 5 mature bulls for every 100 cows. When you have a week or 2 weeks to go elk hunt somewhere, your chances of getting into elk really are a lot less than hunting in areas where they have at least 20 to 25 bulls. Even more is even better. 30 to 50 are even better, where they have bull to cow ratios where they manage the elk that way. Your chances of getting into elk are a lot greater, obviously, right? It's common sense. If you're hunting those areas that have better bull to cow ratios, especially if you have a week to 2 weeks to go elk hunt somewhere. Otherwise, you just kind of, it might happen, but you might just spin in your wheels. Try to hunt in those areas that have the good bull to cow ratios like that as much as possible to put those odds into your favor. So,
Absolutely.
just a couple little techniques.
It's been an amazing podcast, man. I really appreciate it. And I think that, we should definitely work on a part 2, probably closer to elk season, and touch on some of the things that maybe we not go over, the decoy type thing and some of the other things that maybe, a little refresher before elk season. What do you think?
Yep. And I will have, that would be a great idea, because I'm going to bring some of the bite and blow type cow calls so you can hear them, so people can learn how to use them. I'll have some of those with me. I'll have a couple of other external type bugles that, the diaphragm's difficult to learn. And some people have a gag reflex. They can't learn it very well for a lot of reasons. Some people have false teeth and they can't use them. There's calls out there that you can use that if you have any of those handicaps, you might say, or those challenges, you can use it. You can use elk bugles. And I'll have some of those other calls with me so I can show people how to use those calls. I'll call Glenberry up, ask him to send me a couple of those little sleazy cow calls. And then, of course, you guys can post the numbers. I'll give you the numbers where people can buy those calls.
Yep.
And you can post them on your website or whatever you have there, or your podcast, so people can link into to buying some of these calls that I'm using.
Absolutely.
I don't make any money off of it. I just want people to be successful using these calls, just like you guys do. You want them to be successful.
100%.
Absolutely. Well, before we sign off, we have one question, and we ask everybody this, and that is, what drives you outdoors, Dieter?
What drives me outdoors? Oh, just you can't put a number or one single factor. I mean, when you're sitting there in the morning in a tree stand in the Midwest or an elk hunt, and you're sitting there and you're smelling the fermenting leaves, that there's not a video or a book out there that can explain what that smells like or what it really looks like. Or you're seeing, the fog settle on a hayfield somewhere, or you're smelling that fresh cut corn in the Midwest, or you're in the Southwest and you smell after the rain and you smell that sagebrush, and you see the blooming of the sagebrush. I'm not even talking about the animals here, guys. I'm talking about nature. And you're up in the upper Midwest and you're sitting next to a river, and the river flows through it. I mean, you guys up in northern Montana, Idaho, where they made that movie and where that story took place of a river runs through it, and you're sitting next to those streams by yourself, or you're up in the British Columbia Alberta, Canada, and I'm sitting there one day moose hunting, and I'm watching these leaves come down out of the aspens like snowfall just all around me. It's moments like that I'm not even talking about animals here. I'm just talking about being in nature. The animals taste great that we hunt. That's the icing of the cake for all of us. But it's those moments that nobody else will ever be able to share with you, that you will have inside of you for the rest of your life, that you can't really explain to people unless you've been there. Maybe I've, struck a nerve or just struck a memory just talking about those moments. It's not even about the kill. It's about being in nature and the smells and the sights and the sunsets and the sunrises, and of course having a freaking elk in your face just bugling at you. Just,
that's life.
Screaming. and watching the steam roll out of his face, and you're close enough. And when they urinate on themselves, the wind's in your face. And this happened a couple years ago, and you're tasting the freaking urine because it's coming at you because the wind's in your face. You don't want to talk about those moments, but it's those moments you remember.
You don't forget that. It's a memory like you'll never forget.
No. Or that turkey just sitting in front of you, just spitting and drumming.
Yep. When you can just feel it in your chest.
And you got that cool air on your face, and your heart's just going whoom, 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 whoom. What drives me? All of it. All of it. You can't just put your finger on one single thing. There's too much. There's too much to remember out in the outdoors. That's why we do it. There's so much coming at you at once that if you don't live it, you don't go out there and live it, you'll never experience it. So for you new hunters out there, it's not about the kill. It's about all those things that I just talked about. And yeah,
absolutely.
That's what drives me.
100%. And I couldn't agree with you more. It was beautifully said. It was very eloquent. So
yeah, thanks.
Well, before we wrap this up, how can anybody get a hold of you, whether it be social media or if you have preferred means?
Oh, my email address is my first initial last name. So it's D as in Dieter, David, DKA, B as in boy, O as in Oscar, T as in Tango, H as in hotel, at msn.com, Microsoft Networks. So D Kaboth at msn.com. Phone number is 208-816-0684. You can shoot me a text or a phone call. I'm usually good about calling people back, so don't worry about that, or shoot me a text. I'm really good about texting, but if I'm in a meeting or something like that, or if I'm with customers, it's hard to, of course, break
understandable
away at that time. But if you haven't, listen, if you're stuck on a situation, you're going elk hunting, you're stuck, something's happening out there. Hey, what do I do? Run it past me. I've had so many buddies last year, even friends that I've met over the years, are sitting there, messaging me, and I'm messaging at 12 o'clock at night, even though I got to get up in the morning. People are running into problems or situations that techniques they might want to try. Run them past me. And I'm going to tell you something about elk hunting right now. If you think you're going to call in every elk you hear, you are sadly mistaken. If you think you're going to, I am humbled by, how I want to say this, I'm humbled by elk every year. Just if you think I know it all, I don't. I have situations and techniques that I've used that have been very successful for me. They don't always work, but they do work. They don't always work. But there's times out there that I know that I'm going to get an elk. He's coming, and he just stops coming in. For what reason? To this day, I don't know. Why did they stop? Why did they hang up? I still scratch my head and I wonder. I am humbled by elk every year, but I am an alcoholic. I can't stop hunting them, and I'll never stop hunting them as long as I can make my legs move. And I love calling in elk for people, especially that have never taken an elk. I am guide for Mangus Outfitters. It's MAG, Mangus, and MANGUS Outfitters out of Pie Town, New Mexico. Tuffy Barnett is the owner. I guide for those guys. And I find it a compliment every year when I have guys that want to come back every year and say, I want you to guide for me again because I've never had such a good time, And sometimes those hunters don't kill something. Some of them go, but every one of them get a shot. Never had a hunter not go with me and not get a shot. So
outstanding.
Everybody's had opportunities.
Well, that's wonderful. And Dieter, we can't thank you enough for jumping on here and dropping the knowledge. There will definitely be a part 2 coming up on this. I got a feeling that there's a lot we didn't touch on that's going to get into the nuances as some of these folks start planning into their hunts for this year. So we want to make sure that we follow up on that and get them all that information, see if we can increase that success. So
I love to do that. I love helping people. I think God gave me this ability, and I'm not going to sit there and hold it all to myself. I want to be able to share with others what I've learned over the years. I've been doing this since about 1985, 86-ish, right around in there. and learned a lot. And I want to share all the information. I want people to be successful. I want them to harvest an elk. There's nothing like the taste of elk meat. It's one of my favorite venisons. It's nothing like deer. It's even better.
Oh, I can't agree with you more there. So yeah. On that note,
appreciate you guys having me on. I really appreciate it. And
Thank you.
When we talked about this in the beginning, we talked about, just doing a half-hour session. There's no way that we can talk about all we talked about.
No.
That's right.
So,
these are great ones, and it's great information, and it's stuff that doesn't get spread out here on the East Coast a whole lot, especially for these folks who really want to get into it. So it's definitely very valuable and something we can push people back to this episode for a long time to come. Mm-hmm. And couldn't have done it without you. So we appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Trevor. Appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. And guys, for everyone listening, we hope you took notes. And if not, go ahead and play it over again, because there's a lot of information in here, and I guarantee you won't remember it all. And with that being said, we just want to thank you guys for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.